So thank you and welcome everybody for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Robin Mills and I'm a non-resident fellow here at the Centre on Global Energy Policy. And today we're going to discuss unlocking natural gas in the Iraq Kurdistan region. And I should quickly say that this event is being webcast live and the full video will be available online in the coming days. For those of you joining us via Zoom, you can submit a question for the panelists at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And as a reminder, our events are closed captioned, and you can turn the captions on by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and then selecting show subtitles. So I'm delighted to be joined today by three very strong panelists who have deep expertise in gas and the energy sector in the Iraq Kurdistan region. And these are Her Excellency Bayan Sami Abdul Rahman, who's the Kurdistan region representative to the United States, Jim Jewell, Deputy Director at the US Department of Energy at the Office of International Affairs, and Mohammed Makawi, the Executive Director of Projects at Crescent Petroleum and Dana Gas for the Kurdistan region. And we're discussing unlocking natural gas in the Iraq Kurdistan region. And it's a particularly timely event, of course. So I should say this event arises from a study which was very generously supported by the US Department of Energy on unlocking gas, and that study was primarily conducted last year. Obviously, since it was completed, there's been some very important developments in the global gas market and in the Iraq and in the Kurdistan region. Developments of international politics, obviously the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the very high level of natural gas prices in Europe, and concerns about energy security. And important political developments within Iraq itself as well. And those events have made perhaps the gas resources of the Kurdistan region even more important and timely than they already were, and then therefore raised the profile of developing those resources. They've also introduced some perhaps additional challenges and complications on the political side, which we will, I'm sure, get into in this discussion, and discuss also possible solutions and ways forward. So the agenda for today is I will give a short presentation which will cover the results of our study on the issues, challenges, and potential opportunities for unlocking gas in the Iraq Kurdistan region. And then we'll hear from each of our panelists, and then we'll have a moderated discussion and a chance for the audience Q&A. So I'm just going to begin my presentation at this stage, which will just occupy us for a few minutes. So you should now all be able to see the first screen of the presentation. The opportunities to strengthen the natural gas sector in the Kurdistan region. The first question is why? Why was the study important? Why was the US Department of Energy keen to support it? Why were the Kurdish authorities keen to cooperate and assist? Why was the private sector, international oil and gas companies interested in cooperating and providing their thoughts and support and information for the study? Well, the Iraq Kurdistan region contains most of the country's non-associated natural gas resources, and these are enough, indeed more than enough, for the Iraq Kurdistan region to be self-sufficient and to meet domestic demand within the region itself and potentially within the rest of Iraq, to support economic growth and social well-being. It's well known that Iraq in general suffers from power shortages. It suffers from a lack of diversification of the economy, and various other problems, and the access to reliable and affordable modern energy is extremely important. To increase and diversify the Iraq Kurdistan region's government revenues, at the moment those are heavily dependent on oil sales, as indeed is the whole of Iraq. Gas provides an additional source of revenues, but also a diversification of the source of those revenues. And to facilitate wider economic and industrial development, as I say, the economy can benefit greatly from developing more industries, gas-based industries, and the wider growth that brings. Gas developments, of course, have wider economic knock-ons and create linkages through the economy. And the access to reliable electricity and reliable gas supplies is absolutely essential for this wider economic and industrial development. That can be within the energy sector, it can be within the energy intensive sector, but it can be a wider development as well. And on the environmental side, reducing air pollution, Iraq relies very heavily at the moment on burning oil for power, whether that's diesel generators or large-scale fuel oil power plants, obviously very polluting and noisy, and with high greenhouse gas emissions. There's also a high level of flaring, and that flaring is mostly, I'd say, in Iraq outside the Kurdistan region, but the Kurdistan region has a significant amount of associated gas, which is some of which is flared as well. So capturing that gas effectively and using it to replace oil-fired power, it brings us significant local and indeed global environmental benefits. Providing a predictable, transparent and attractive structure for international investors is very important in the gas and power sector. Investors need to be able to see that their investments will be fairly rewarded with respect to the risks that they take, that returns will be attractive and will be comparable to those attractive and achievable in other areas. And this, by creating confidence in investment, can also help bring in investors into wider sectors as well. And in general, promoting investment and trade with both with the other parts of Iraq and with the Kurdistan region's neighbors can help facilitate political stability, trade relations, economic relations, and also by bringing energy to those neighbors helps their economic situation and therefore improves the whole regional political environment. And finally, the very important key issue, of course, I mentioned Russia-Ukraine at the start. So improving regional and international energy supply security by bringing in another major supplier of gas and possibly electricity in the region, and therefore diversifying supply, reducing reliance on certain suppliers who've shown themselves to be not reliable or to have other agendas, and so improving the regional political situation in that way as well. And Europe, of course, is looking around very keenly for additional support sources of gas. There are not many neighbors of Europe which can easily supply large amounts of affordable gas to Europe. The Kurdistan region could be one of those that can. And so in terms of actual numbers, the strengthening natural gas sector could facilitate something like $1.2 billion of direct revenues from gas sales annually. That was a figure that was derived, of course, before the recent rise in gas prices. It might be a lot higher now, but obviously gas prices are volatile, so that number would go up and down, but this gives you a ballpark idea. We mentioned that the provision of reliable and cost-effective electricity and gas, the reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, which could save across the whole of Iraq about 10 million tons per year of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. So there are sometimes concerns about new fossil fuel developments and whether they should be financed. But in this case, there's a very clear climate benefit to replacing oil-based energy with gas. Improving the alignment of the Kurdistan regional government and the federal government, potentially by supplying gas to the federal areas of Iraq, either non-Kurdistan areas, and improving Iraqi energy independence by reducing the dependence on imported gas and therefore reducing the influence of other regional actors. And finally, the external sales markets, which the key one there is Turkey, and potentially via Turkey to Southeastern Europe, and therefore replacing Russian gas into Turkey and into the Balkans. And if we look at the production potential of the Kurdistan region, it has very large and important non-associated and to some extent associated natural gas resources. Now, the exact order of the fields and the development of fields we've shown on this chart is not prescriptive, that the fields could be developed in a different order. Some fields may take priority over others, and they all have different challenges for development. But this is an indicative view, and this will show you that at the moment, we estimate there's about 10 billion cubic meters per year of gas demand within the Kurdistan region, primarily for power and to some extent for industry. That is not all being met right now. About 5 BCM of that is being met, and the rest is met either by oil or it's just unserved demand. And a large part of that's met by the Khor non-associated gas project. And of course, it's excellent having Mohammed Makawi on this panel, who from Crescent and Dana Gas, of course, the operators of that project. And there are further developments that could come in over the next few years into the mid and late 2020s that would both further development of Khor and other fields, which would ramp up production very significantly. And technically, we could see as much as 40 BCM per year by the kind of early mid 2030s. A lot has to go right to make this happen. We're not saying this will happen, but this is technical potential if markets are available, if the policies are right, and if the infrastructure is constructed at a reasonable pace. Domestic demand, of course, would increase within the region as power demand goes up and more industries connect to gas. So power and industrial demand perhaps reaches 15 BCM in kind of medium to longer term, but there's still a very substantial surplus up to 25 BCM potential surplus, which could be used either for developing other gas use within the Kurdistan region and federal Iraq or for export. And in terms of the export markets or the sales markets, one of these, of course, is potential markets is within Iraq itself, and that's the non-Kurdistan part of Iraq. This area suffers at the moment from very severe gas deficits and power deficits. It imports gas from Iran. It has gas of its own, primarily associated gas, but not all of this gas is captured. There's a very high level of flaring, and even so, gas is insufficient to meet power demand. And so there's a lot of use of oil, which is of course very polluting, and then there's even a significant deficit in the overall fuel supply. And so we see that the provision potentially of gas supplies from the Kurdistan region to federal Iraq could help fill this gap in the longer term and provide more reliable gas and power to federal Iraq. And that would diminish the requirement in federal Iraq in the longer term to buy Iranian gas, which has problems of political dependency. It's quite expensive, and suppliers have proved to be quite unreliable in recent years. The alternative for that, or the complement, depending how you look at it, would be sales to Turkey, and then from Turkey onto potentially onto southeastern Europe. And I've shown here on the right-hand chart the gas balance within the Kurdistan region. You can see this about 1 BCM of demand within the region, as I mentioned, and then from the kind of mid-2020s, a gradually increasing share of gas as production ramps up that could go to Turkey, which is the yellow amount. And it's interesting to say that the markets of Turkey and federal Iraq are quite complementary. Federal Iraq uses gas in the summer for power generation, for air conditioning. Turkey uses gas more in the winter for heating, and so there's some potential to balance supplies between those two markets. But there's also a question of prioritization and politics shift and the market shift. At the moment, you might say the Turkish market has become maybe more accessible and more attractive, and that does seem to be the market that is being prioritized by developers at the moment. But factors on that can change, of course. But we do see the Kurdistan region could be a very significant exporter of gas to Turkey, and potentially then onto southeastern Europe. It faces some competition in that market. There's also a lot of interest, of course, of reducing the use of Russian gas and accessing new cost-competitive gas supplies. And we've set up a possible potential timeline. This is very indicative, of course, but this gives you an idea of the steps that would be required in terms of funding, in terms of field development and infrastructure, including new pipelines, connections onto Turkey, which are under construction at the moment, commercial deals with Turkey, and then the political alignment that's required to allow this. And this of course is politically challenging, as we know there are political debates at the moment within Iraq over the degree to which the Kurdistan region can develop its natural resources autonomously or semi-autonomously, or to the extent to which those would be directed from Baghdad. So that's obviously a very important and ongoing political issue and challenge. But this lays out a rough roadmap up to about 2026, when the region could be a large-scale exporter of natural gas. As I mentioned, there are challenges. There are political divisions. We have to acknowledge these. That the political divisions within the Iraq Kurdistan region, and then between the Kurdistan region and the federal Iraqi authorities. And then we've mentioned some of the outside political interference and security threats. We have seen some security challenges in the Kurdistan region recently from different actors. I alluded to the reluctance from international financial institutions to fund fossil fuel projects right now. This, I think, is a project with these projects in the Kurdistan region, projects with an environmental benefit and a climate benefit, as I've shown, with a major economic and social benefit, and an important energy security benefit. So if there is a willingness to make some exceptions for particularly promising fossil fuel projects, this looks like one that can make that claim. The credibility of payment guarantees from the electricity sector, that's very important for development of the domestic market. Is there an actor who can stand behind payment guarantees for this gas, or does there need to be another framework for that? The gas markets are volatile. I mean, they're currently very favorable. Prices are very strong, and there's a great need for gas, but gas prices and gas demand goes up and down. So that of course is a challenge, particularly with the very high level of political market uncertainty we have at the moment. And these are major, multi-billion-dollar and multi-year projects. The need for clear signals and stability for investors, that's not always been clear in the Kurdistan region. The investors need to see that, as I said earlier, that they will be fairly paid for their investments, rewarded for taking risk, and that policy will be understandable and predictable. There are technical challenges and logistic ones. I think these are easier to overcome if the policy situation and the market situation is there, but there are issues. Some of these fields have high levels of sour gas. It's expensive, toxic, and difficult to process. It produces large amounts of sulfur, which have to be dealt with. So that this adds cost and complexity. And then there are logistics for the associated gas, numerous fields with small or only moderate amounts of associated gas in mountainous areas. So we're requiring infrastructure to gather that gas and bring it to market. And then finally, and we've laid out a roadmap for this, the need for commercial and regulatory capacity building within the Iraq Kurdistan region, and particularly within the Ministry of Natural Resources, to ensure that it can manage the whole sector effectively and deal with international oil company investors and with international partners and gas customers and so on. So the MNR has obviously built its capacity in oil over the years and has quite a long experience of that now, but less experience with gas. And this is the link to the report. So we'd be delighted, obviously, to receive any feedback and comments from any of the audience on the report, which is available here for free download. So that was a very quick taster of what's in the report, but I'm now delighted to call on my fellow panelists to make their contributions. And I would like to just remind you, for those watching online, my name is Robin Mills, and I'm here with Her Excellency Bayan Sami Abdurrahman, Kurdistan Region Representative to the United States, Jim Jewell, Deputy Director at the US Department of Energy at the Office of International Affairs, and Mohammed Makawi, Executive Director of Projects for Crescent Petroleum Dana Gas in the Kurdistan region. And we're discussing unlocking natural gas in the Iraq Kurdistan region. And I would like to call on my panelists to make their introductory remarks and to begin, please, with you, Bayan.
Thank you very much, Robin. And here I would like to thank many people who made this gas study possible. I'd like to thank Jim Jewell, who is with us today, his colleague at the Department of Energy, Landon Derrence, and the former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of International Affairs, Dr. Matthew Zace, who has since left the Department of Energy, but really he was the engine behind the idea of a gas study commissioned by the US Department of Energy. I think, Robin, you've laid out very clearly why the Kurdistan gas market matters, not only to the people of Kurdistan region and Iraq, for the well-being of the country, for our relations with our neighbors, but also for the international gas market. And I think that's something very important to remember today when there is a global energy crisis. It may be transitory, it may be long-term. I think also it's very important to note what you said, Robin, and what is stated in the gas study, that while there is a huge focus on environmentally friendly sources of energy, I think developing Kurdistan's gas sector will contribute to better environment in Kurdistan region and Iraq, and it will be environmentally friendly, even though it is a fossil fuel. I think that part of developing our gas sector is also very important. I'd also really like to discuss a little bit about America's involvement in Kurdistan's oil and gas sector. There is a great deal of American content, and I think we're very proud of that in Kurdistan. Private sector companies have invested in the Kurdistan region's oil and gas sector. Companies like Chevron, HKN Energy, Dana Gas and Crescent Petroleum, Hunt Oil, Shamarand, and many others. These are companies that have invested millions and billions of dollars in Kurdistan's economy. And their investment has created jobs in Kurdistan, but also in America. We have benefited from American expertise. And I would say also America, the American government has a stake in Kurdistan's energy sector, not only through the private sector companies that have invested, but also through the DFC, the US Development Finance Corporation, that has made a loan of $250 million to the Pearl Consortium to expand the Khor gas project. So we're very proud of that engagement with America, with the companies, with the US government, and we look forward to that continuing. Robin, you touched on some of the political problems that we're facing right now. That is a challenge for us and for all of those who have invested in Kurdistan and Iraq's oil and gas sector. I think what we're seeing is high stakes political brinkmanship between Erbil and Baghdad. It's very unfortunate from our perspective. We have always looked forward to reaching a consensus with Baghdad on the way forward for the entire oil and gas sector of Kurdistan and the whole of Iraq. As the Iraqi constitution states, the natural resources of Iraq belong to the people of Iraq. And I think that's a foundational statement that all of us should abide by. For us in the Kurdistan region, the current, let's say, brinkmanship that we're facing, sometimes in the courts, sometimes in the political discussions, really needs to find a political settlement. And there are opportunities to actually turn this crisis into something that will settle long-standing disputes between Erbil and Baghdad and create a win-win situation for the people of Kurdistan, for the people of Iraq, and for all of those companies and institutions that have invested in developing our energy sector. I think I should leave my remarks there. I want to finally just say that we very strongly welcome this study. We thank the Department of Energy for commissioning the study. We thank Qamar Energy and Robin, yourself, your team at Qamar for doing the legwork and producing this study. We will need time to really analyze all of the statements and arguments made here in the product that has been released today. And I will leave it to my colleagues at the Ministry of Natural Resources to really deliver their remarks on what the study recommends. But we're very pleased to see the study published. And again, we thank the investors who have made a commitment to Kurdistan, the Department of Energy, and Qamar Energy. And with that, Robin, I will hand back to you.
Great, thank you very much, Bayan, for the opening remarks. Now I'd like to turn to Jim Jewell, Deputy Director of the US Department of Energy, the Office of International Affairs. Jim, for your opening remarks.
Great, thanks, Robin. Thanks, Bayan. First, I'd obviously like to thank Robin and his team for their work on the project, and also Bayan and her team for their support, and also the KRG ministries, as well as our friends in the IOC community and others in the consulting community who helped refine the studies it developed. I know we didn't integrate everything, every criticism everyone had, but that's the way these kind of studies work, and we are very open to further discussion. I'd also like to note the study we finalized the study in September 2021, mostly with data and analysis completed in 2020 to early 21. So the study kind of really represents a snapshot of potential for resource utilization prior to recent events, as Robin noted. We tasked this study to show how gas development in the Iraq Kurdistan region could be harnessed to reduce reliance on external suppliers, reduce flaring, and increase energy supplies for all Iraqis. This was, as Bayan noted, was under the leadership in the previous administration of Matt Zais. And we do thank him for his support in that, but yeah, he has since moved on from Department of Energy, and I think all of you are still in contact with him as in his new role. So I'll leave it that there. In light of recent events, of course, we're all considering the prospects for Iraqi and Kurdish gas to be exported north to Turkey for their use in the southeast, and perhaps to displace gas from Russia and Iran, or even to sell on to Europe. But to realize the potential of energy in Iraq Kurdistan region, to retain customers globally, and to obtain both government-sponsored and commercial finance, it will be increasingly essential to ensure projects are designed to minimize flaring, venting, and leaks of greenhouse gases. Developing cleaner oil and gas production, as well as supplying energy to either federal Iraq or neighboring countries, requires good, stable commercial terms and a pathway to ensuring that federal Iraq more easily sees the benefit of energy produced by companies operating in the region. This is mostly what the idea was for this study, and mostly what the content is about ultimately. We can argue about some of the details, the numbers, but the most important message is there is considerable potential for resource development in Kurdistan under the right conditions. I think that in the long term, the argumentation of the study is sound. Satisfying local needs first can be lucrative financially, if challenging in the short run due to internal divisions and strife, as Bayan alluded to, and so did Robin. But there is little alternative to ensure that there is a stable foundation of support for commercial development and future exports than to make sure local needs are satisfied first. Iraq needs to get full value from its resources, whether from export or internal use, while also committing to minimize leaks, flares, and sequester or utilize greenhouse gas emissions to the greatest extent possible. Even in times when revenue is increasing, such as now, it is difficult to pay for all the infrastructure needed. Private investment and international finance remains key to future progress. The KRG could, of course, on the point of exports north, could swap gas with Turkey or feed into a more integrated future Turkey gas trading system. But to be honest, the distances are far, the political risk is high. And implementing projects that are viable commercially and environmentally requires getting the policies exactly right, which is another key aspect of the study. Production costs for some producers, distance, and growing focus on emissions reductions mean that even getting the investment policy exactly right might not be enough to tap distant markets feasibly in the long run. But not getting the policy environment right will ensure that this is not possible. It is also still a key point that paying Iran for gas and flaring even greater amounts of domestic production is both an environmental and a national security risk for Iraq. Granted that the vast majority of that flaring occurs in Basra, not in Kurdistan, but it's still a key aspect of development going forward. A rapid transition to clean energy is essential for all of us, and we need to balance plans to use natural gas with ensuring efforts to mitigate emissions and invest in cleaner technology. Making this happen is a key priority for our leadership here in the US. We are interested in continuing discussions on the role of gas in Iraq and Iraq Kurdistan region's development, and to find more ways to work together to determine how natural gas might fit into an increasingly decarbonized clean energy future. We also recognize the national security and economic benefits in the Iraqi context of producing the cleanest gas possible, especially in light of acute energy and climate crisis facing all of you in Iraq and in the Middle East. We must be upfront about addressing challenges natural gas emissions will pose to the health of our world and the urgent need to develop new technology and partner to invest in modern infrastructure. There's the role for natural gas to play, particularly when paired with renewable energy and existing, ever improving and emerging technology to abate emissions. If we are to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, we must be especially thoughtful about new gas infrastructure, ensuring we account for the risk of new greenfield natural gas infrastructure ending up as stranded assets while prioritizing the importance of energy access, jobs, and broader economic growth. I know Iraq is rightly interested in harnessing and deriving maximum value from local resources during the coming transition from fuels with higher greenhouse gas emissions. I hope we can continue working together to develop technological solutions so that natural gas can be economically and sustainably used in Iraq. We must work together to plan for infrastructure that is flexible enough to incorporate renewable energy, battery storage, hydrogen, and smart electricity grids, as well as ensuring redundancy to enhance a reliable baseload generation. As our secretary is fond of saying, we are the solutions people. So, it's the Department of Energy is here to, help work through research on technology solutions and implementation. With integrated systems, the move toward cleaner energy can be facilitated by using natural gas developed cleanly and with ever lower emissions to ensure the flexible power infrastructure needed to reach net zero emissions and ensure an affordable transition to a decarbonized power sector in the future. Iraq has ever higher temperatures and ever decreasing water resources, and we would be willing to also work together with you on energy efficiency and water resource management technologies that can reduce energy use and contribute less to increasing climate effects. DOE firmly believes that the connection between energy and climate is an opportunity to use energy innovation to increase economic growth while decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. Clean energy projects present business and job opportunities that can stimulate local supply chain development, training, and high-quality jobs, as well as the opportunity to pass on to generations that follow some of the tools that we need to build the green energy ecosystems of the future. The world is moving toward clean energy, as we need all of you to be part of that transition and to benefit from it, and we want to work with you all to make it happen. Finally, the transition will not be accomplished solely by government. It must be undertaken collaboratively by governments, universities, research institutes, non-governmental organizations, multilateral donor institutions, and the private sector. That is all for my prepared remarks. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thanks very much, Jim. And I'd now like to call on our final speaker for his prepared remarks, Mohammed Makawi, who's Managing Director of Kurdistan Operations at Crescent Dana Gas, the largest private sector gas developer in the Kurdistan region, and therefore a very important player in the region's gas development. So please, Mohammed, for your opening remarks. If you could just unmute yourself. Yeah, we still have you on mute, unfortunately, Mohammed.
Okay, how about now? Sorry.
Great, got you now, thanks.
Okay, yeah, it's my fault. I was saying that, thank you, Robin. Crescent Petroleum and Dana Gas are the founders and the majority shareholders and operators of the Pearl Petroleum asset in Kurdistan, comprising mainly Komor field and Chemshamal field. Both of them are natural gas fields. We are currently producing 450 million standard cubic feet per day of gas, which is completely delivered to the KRG basically, and it's fully used for power generation in 4 power stations across the country. This represents more than 75% of all the gas that is consumed in Kurdistan. We have a project undergoing right now, being implemented, and it will be completed by April, May of next year. It will add another 250 million standard cubic feet per day of gas, thus making our total production by April of next year at 700 million standard cubic feet per day. And we have also plans for 2 other projects immediately after that, and this will bring up our production capacity from the 700 to the 1,050 million scf per day. So really, we believe within the next 2 to 2.5 years, we will be in a position to produce and meet the gas demand of the whole Kurdistan region of Iraq. And we will be then happy to look into exporting our gas to the rest of Iraq, either as gas or, if the KRG prefers, through power generation in the KRI and exporting power to federal Iraq, whichever way is convenient for both sides. And of course, with the infrastructure that's being now awarded, I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's a pipeline that's been awarded recently as a government-driven project to construct a complete network of large diameter gas pipelines to connect all the gas producers and the gas users in the KRI, and also to bring the pipeline infrastructure all the way to the border. The first phase of this project will be completed by April and May of next year to meet with our new addition of gas supply, the 250 million scf that we talked about. And then the second phase will immediately follow up after that. So from the point of view of production capacity, of infrastructure, our company and our group is in a position to meet all the local demand for gas. And of course, along with that, we are also reducing our flaring and emissions of gas to nearly zero. And we're offsetting any remainder of that through carbon credits that we are achieving. We have reserves, which is enough to meet the proven reserves, enough to meet all these projects in place and more. But we also have resources in these 2 fields, Chemchemal and Khomor, which is in the order of 75 trillion cubic feet of gas. Now, this would really rank these 2 fields by far as the 2 biggest gas fields in Iraq. And here we're talking about non-associated gas fields. Now, of course, I mean, the talk nowadays is all about a transition, and I think everybody is in this process of transition all over the world, but the pace differs from place to another based on geography, politics, resources, wealth, and all these things. Iraq is, as you mentioned, Robin, and as Jim mentioned, is no different to that than any other country, including, of course, the Kurdistan region of Iraq. But as it is today, by replacing other liquid fuels, which would have to be used in these power station or industrial users, we are creating an enormous positive environmental impact and CO2 savings. I mean, last year, we saved 5 million tons of CO2. Next year, when our project comes on stream and we start producing the 700 million standard cubic feet per day, we will be saving 8 million tons of CO2. Now, this is already way much higher than all the Tesla cars in the whole world. So, look, we all understand the transition and the need to do something about it, but there is also big benefits in using gas right now, which otherwise would have to be some other fuel. Um, I mentioned about the gas pipelines. We were the first actually to build a gas pipeline in Kurdistan. Our project in 2007, 2008 included building 180 kilometers of high pressure gas pipeline, 24-inch, which really was the backbone of the gas distribution from Khor into the power stations in Kurdistan. The only other pipeline that was built from there until today was the 36-inch crude oil pipeline, which is now being used by all the oil producers in KRI to transport the gas to through Turkey for export. I would like also here to mention what you've also mentioned before. We have very much appreciated and the support of the DFC and the lending of $250 million to our what we call Khor 250 project. And this is the same project. I'm talking about the same project in different ways. That will be completed early next year. And we look forward for DFCs and other multinational support for our second train from Khor. We have plans for 2 trains. Each train will have a capacity of 250 million SCF. The first train will be completed next year in April, and the second train will start immediately after that, of course, assuming that we will get the financing for the second train. But we will also have another project at Chemchemal to start the production from Chemchemal. There was a little bit of talk about political security. It's these things that took place in the last few months, and also some events took place recently. Things like this happen from time to time, and the differences between Baghdad and Erbil are not new, and they've always found ways between Baghdad and Erbil to resolve and keep things moving for the benefit of the people of Iraq, be it in the rest of Iraq or be it in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. I'll try to stop here because I was told that I only have 5 minutes. So I'll leave it for any questions. I'll be happy to provide any answers. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Mohammed. Much appreciated to get your insights. And just to remind you for the audience questions, if you'd like to, if you're joining by Zoom and you want to submit a question, you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we have had a number of questions come in already, and I think I'll turn to those since there are some excellent questions to tackle. So the first one, and I think Bayan, probably this is one for you. How the development of gas production in Iraqi Kurdistan can support the improvement in social well-being of the population?
Thank you. That's a really important question. You know, for us, historically in Kurdistan region, our natural resources, all of Iraq's natural resources, were not really used to the benefit of the people of Iraq. Under the former regime, oil wealth was used to buy weapons that were used against our own people. So it's very important for us that the oil wealth, the gas wealth, all of the natural resources of Iraq, including Kurdistan region, are used for the benefit, the social and economic welfare of our country and our people. I mentioned earlier that through the private sector investment that we've had from American companies and then the DFC, but also European and other partners, we've been able to create jobs in Kurdistan. We've been able to bring wealth to Kurdistan. Today, we're exporting 400,000 up to 500,000 barrels of oil per day. In terms of gas, 500 million cubic feet of gas is being produced in the Kurdistan region. With this global energy crisis that we have, if our oil and gas sector is shut down, that kind of contribution will go off. the oil market and the gas market globally. And this comes at a time when international leaders are pleading with Middle Eastern leaders to increase their production. They're pleading with OPEC members to increase their production. Well, before asking OPEC members to increase their production, let's safeguard what we're already producing in the Kurdistan region and contributing to the market.
Great, thank you, Bayan, for that. I've got a number of questions here, which I think I will just try to group, and I think these are questions really from Mohammed, to the extent that you can comment on these. They're kind of related to infrastructure. So from Kent Massey of Zolas, please comment on the development status of key infrastructure pipelines required to export gas. And from William Crisp is asking, when will the Khor expansion project resume, and what are the enhanced security measures that have been introduced? So to the extent, Mohammed, you can speak to those, would appreciate your thoughts.
Sure. We call it the common user pipeline, or that's what the government calls it, or the CUP. The project was awarded last December by the government to a local entity to act as an EPC contractor to build the pipeline. And an engineering firm was designated for to complete all the engineering work and the procurement for the material of the pipeline. This is given to a company called ILF. What we understood from the local company is called KAR, K-A-R, that ILF has completed the work and they are ready to place order for all the line pipe material and any other material required for the construction of the pipeline. Now, recently, there's been some restructuring, as we understood it from the government itself, of how they want to restructure the ownership and the operatorship of this common user pipeline, which may bring in more private sector participation into the pipeline than just KRG control, which is actually is great news. We are private sector, and we believe that private sectors can do things, commercial things, slightly better, with full respect to government's contribution, of course. So we're waiting to hear the details from the government. We don't think this would impact the schedule of the pipeline. It will just probably impact the corporate structure. As I said, with more tilting to the private sector and less government control. So this is on the pipeline. I don't know if I answered the question completely. Now, with regard to the one with the contractors and how would that the delay impact the project, I believe this question is related to the recent rocket attacks on near our construction site. Alhamdulillah, I would also like to add that nobody was hurt. There were 3 very small projectiles that were fired in the last 4 days, actually, or within a period of 4 days. And they all fell in just open areas, causing absolutely no damage and no injury. The government have already, or the security forces in Kurdistan have already identified. They announced that. I mean, we don't know who was behind it. They identified the party who was behind it, and they are in communication with the authorities who have control over these parties to put a stop to these childish acts. And now, actually, as I heard, as you all heard, that this could be an event that would bring the political parties in Kurdistan closer to each other and unify their ranks for the benefit of the region and the people of the region.
Great, thank you, Mohammed. So now, again, I'll group some questions here, and I think these are probably best for you to answer, Jim, to the extent that you can. I appreciate you may not be able to give full answers to some of these. So Ali Sarabaz, a journalist at the Rural Media Network from Kurdistan Region. The decision of the federal court and the missiles launched by the militias pose a threat to the process of developing and increasing the production of gas in the Kurdistan region. And does the US have any plans to eliminate these risks?
I mean, I can't speak to specific plans, but we're always working with our partners in Erbil and Baghdad to, work through the security challenges. With respect to the lawsuits in the court, we're not generally in the business of getting in the way of legal processes as they play out. But I would most certainly defer to my State Department colleagues who are more involved in facilitating that sort of discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And a question for Bayan here from Alan Atouf. How is the Kurdistan leadership planning to respond to the Iraq Supreme Court's decision to blacklist oil and gas companies working in the Iraqi Kurdistan region?
Well, thank you for that question. We have already begun to respond to that. There have been, of course, public statements by the leadership in Kurdistan region that have set out our perspective, but also there have been countersuits launched. So there have been legal challenges from Erbil challenging the steps being taken by Baghdad. Where, as I said earlier in my opening remarks, we're in this phase right now of high stakes political brinkmanship, and the courts have become the battleground. From Kurdistan region's perspective, the Iraqi constitution sets out that natural resources in Iraq belong to the people of Iraq. The constitution sets out the Kurdistan region as a region which has different powers and authorities and responsibilities compared to a province. We will not let go of our constitutional rights. We achieve those after decades of blood being shed. We're not going to let go of them easily. We don't want to fight. We want cooperation. We want dialogue. We want consensus with our fellow Iraqis. And ultimately, that's the solution that we need to reach. If I may just add something to what Mohammed said earlier, I think the question, if I heard it correctly, was when will Dana Gas resume operations at Khormor? As far as I'm aware, operations never stopped, right? They never stopped at Khormor. Operations have continued. And I hope, Mohammed, you will correct me if I'm wrong. As far as I'm aware, operations never stopped.
You're absolutely right, Bayan Khan. The operation never stopped for a second. Sorry, I should have said that. Business as usual, there's no impact whatsoever.
Thank you. Just one other thing to add, which is, as Mohammed indicated, there have been tensions before between Erbil and Baghdad. There have been situations where we faced a crisis, but we've overcome them. I mean, what could be worse than having ISIS 20 kilometers from your gas or oil field or from the borders of Erbil? We have faced severe crises and we've overcome them, and we will overcome this as well. It is tough, it is challenging for the Kurdistan region, for our partners in the oil and gas sector, but we will overcome them together. And ultimately, the way forward is dialogue, agreement, cooperation, and I think that's what we will achieve.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to add, Robin, that emphasize what Bayan said. I think we very much support dialogue and working this out as best we can through the process. And that's, we'll do, the U.S. government will do what we can to facilitate discussion, but like, it's try and be even-handed and have a good, peaceful discussion among friends. I think that's the most important message, to make sure that there is a process and it's not people are talking to each other and we work out the differences. I just wanted to note, I think the only impact of those strikes was like some of the extern workers had to stop working for a few days, right? And the U.S. government is very pleased we were able to support that project, but like just something that I don't think was said is that going forward, it's going to be difficult for like international and private finance on like the Western government side for gas projects that aren't more specifically targeted at flare reduction and more capturing of CO2 and such. I just want to note that too. Well, thank you. Sorry, Robin.
Great. No, many thanks, Jim. I was just going to point you to the question from Mr. Kurd from Kurdistan TV, who exactly was asking if the US could play a role in helping Erbil and Baghdad overcome the energy dispute. So thanks for answering that preemptively. We're just running up to the end now. We've got a few more excellent questions, which I don't think we have time to address in full, but we have one comment I wanted to highlight from Cem Atat, who's a board member of Siyakalam, a Turkish engineering group, which has a license to import gas into Turkey from Iraq, and comments that his company is very keen on progressing that project and interested in learning more about the progress. I guess one more, we've probably got time for just one more specific question. I think maybe I'll direct to Mohammed. William Crisp. Baker Hughes and Schlumberger said they will not participate in tenders in the Iraq Kurdistan region, and I believe that they've said until they're kind of given clearance by the federal authorities in Baghdad. Will this cause disruption in the gas sector?
We talk to U.S. companies because they provide services to our business in Kurdistan, and although that there's been a lot of announcements in the press about this thing, we haven't seen it. Haven't seen any effect on the ground yet, and I would really wait and see if this thing is really going to happen the way the press has said it. As far as we're concerned, with some of our service providers, still business as usual.
Great, thanks for that. So we've now run out of time. That's as always with these events, it's a pity because we had some other fantastic questions I would love to explore about the role of Russia, the role of gas in the Black Sea, some other political questions as well. But we have to wrap up here, I'm afraid. Thanks very much to our speakers for joining us today. Thanks to you, to our audience, for tuning in and for your excellent questions and contributions. And as we mentioned, the full video recording will be available on the Centre on Global Energy Policy's website in a few days for those who want to see it again or who couldn't tune in. And for a full calendar of upcoming events, please visit the Centre on Global Energy Policy website, and you'll see the staff on the Centre. There'll be a link in the chat box for you to that. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to seeing you soon for further discussions on the exciting and evolving and challenging gas landscape in the region and globally. Thanks to everybody.